Let me ask you guys a question this morning, especially those sitting on the sides and sitting outside. Glad you're here. Sorry you're sitting outside. Welcome to those of you guys that are online. You're sitting way outside, but we're glad you're here. Here's your opening question for you that you've probably never thought about. Why did Jesus preach in parables? Why did Jesus teach in parables? Think about this for a second. Imagine that you are going to hear Jesus. You lived back in his time, right? And you're like, you've heard, you're like, someone's like, hey, have you heard about this Jesus guy? And you're like, yeah, I've heard about this Jesus guy. And they're like, I heard that he like does miracles and it's amazing. And they're like, I've heard that too. And I heard like when he gives speeches, like they're the most amazing speeches I've ever heard. They're like, I've heard that too. I heard he's performing down in the town next to us. Let's go here. And they're like, okay, let's go do that. And so they travel for like a day and a half to come hear Jesus. Right? And everyone sits down and the show begins, right? And an introducer comes up and the introducer says, hey, this next guy, every time I hear him, he's really convicting, right? And they're like, everyone put your hands together for Jesus. And everyone's like, oh, Jesus, right? And Jesus comes up and he goes, what's going on, Little Rock? And Little Rock's like, oh, right? And then he's like, I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna tell you a parable. There's a sower, and he went out and sowed some seed. He threw some on the path, and that got eaten up. And he threw some into some rocky places that just withered away. He threw some seed into some thorns, and that got choked out. And then he threw some seed into some good places, and that grew fruit. And then he says, if you get it, you get it. And he walks away. Do y'all understand how weird that is? Like his disciples are all around him. His disciples are like, ooh, Jesus. They're like peeking behind the curtain. Do you see how big this crowd is? They're like, this is going to be awesome. Jesus, you're going to go out there and rock it. And you're going to be like, you're going to tell them the story. And they're going to be like, this is the best. And there's only 12 of us right now. And we're like scraping together pennies. At the end of this, there's going to be hundreds. And they're probably going to tithe and they're going to serve. This is going to be amazing. We're going to grow this thing, right? And then Jesus goes out and just tells this weird story and everybody leaves. So let me ask you again, why did Jesus teach in parables? And the reason I ask you is that's exactly what his disciples asked, right? So he does this weird story, walks away, and his disciples came and said, hey, Jesus, we have a question, right? He's like, what y'all got? They're like, so why do you teach in weird stories? And here's what you and I expect the answer to be. Because we all know to be a good teacher is you tell a story to illustrate something, right? You have a hard concept and you're trying to get that hard concept across. And so you say, I'm going to tell you a parable, I'm going to tell you a story. And through the story, you can understand and glean what I'm saying. You follow me? That's what we think the answer is. You are wrong. That's completely wrong. Because what Jesus says is this. He replied, he's not talking to the crowds, he's talking to the disciples. He goes, hey guys, I talk in parables because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but what? Not to them. This is why I speak to them in what? Parables. He says, though seeing, they what? And though hearing, they what? Or what? Right? Because he says, in them, it was prophesied about this large crowd. You will be ever hearing, but what? And you'll be ever seeing, but what? He says, for these people's hearts have become calloused. They'll hardly hear with their ears. They have closed their eyes. Everyone say, otherwise. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes. They might hear with their ears. They might understand with their hearts and turn. And what would he do? Okay. Do you understand what Jesus is saying? He had a large crowd, and he'd spoken this weird story, and he said, if you get it, you get it. You drop the mic, and he walked away, and his disciples are like, why do you speak in parables? And he says, I speak in parables so that when they see me, they won't really get me. When they see me, they won't really see me. When they hear me, they won't really understand me. I speak in parables so when they hear me, they won't really perceive me. Because if they did, they would turn around and I would heal them. So Jesus specifically, intentionally confused large crowds of people. Like he specifically, intentionally spoke in a way that left them in the dark wondering, what did he just say? You see, here's the deal. When pastors get big crowds, Easter. When pastor gets big crowd, we get excited. When Jesus got big crowds, he got skeptical, right? Because I like big crowds and I cannot lie. Those other pastors, y'all get it. Y'all get where I was going, right? There are other churches down the street. Y'all can go next week. Listen, you're just here for today. Listen, I've been working on this sermon for a month. For a month. I've known what I was going to talk about this for a month because I want this sermon to be as clear as possible. I want it to be as direct as possible so that some of y'all fall in love with Jesus, and some of them that have been fallen out of love with Jesus will fall back in love with Jesus. And for those of you that don't have a church, like you'll be like, maybe I should come next week because this week was pretty good, right? And by the way, if this service isn't good, come back next service. Bishop is preaching, right? And right. And see, what I want to do as a preacher is I want to draw you in. But Jesus, when he spoke before large crowds, he wanted to weed you out. Come on. For example, if you're not convinced yet, in Luke chapter 14, it says large crowds. Everyone say large crowds. All right, the large crowds were traveling with Jesus again. And his disciples come up to Jesus and they say, "Hey, Jesus." And Jesus is like, "Hey." And they say, the last time you had a large crowd, it didn't go so well. So we were wondering if, since you have a large, and you're about to go, we trust you and all, but if you could tone it down just a little bit so that, maybe more than zero would start coming with us again, okay? And Jesus is like, "Don't worry, I've got you. Got this handled." And Jesus said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be" what? Mine. "And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be" what? And his disciples were like, "Oh my gosh. I can't," right? You following me? But what is Jesus doing? Jesus is saying, "Listen, large crowds, I'm not sure all you should be here. I know that you think you should be here, but I don't think all y'all should be here." Jesus was trying to separate fan from follower. You following? Because here's the deal. Easter is a large crowd. Everyone say large crowd. Listen, I get excited. Jesus got skeptical. I try to draw you in. Jesus tries to weed you out. I try to get you to come back. Jesus tries to make it so hard that you're like, how can you come back to that? You follow me? And here's why. Here's the issue. Here's the issue that they had, and here's the issue that we had. The issue is what we want from Jesus is often not what we need from Jesus. Y'all say that with me, right? Y'all say that with me. What we is often not what we need from Jesus. Kids, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to the parents in a second, but kids, because y'all are in here, y'all know this is true. Because if you're anything like my kids, and you are kids, what you want from your parents looks something like, there might be some variance, but what you want from your parents looks something like this, kids. You want to wake up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because you want to sleep at 3 in the morning. And you want to walk downstairs and your parents say, "Hey, what Netflix show do you want me to put on for you? So they click it on, and you're like, hey, mommy, daddy, can you bring me some cake and some ice cream? And they say, yes, little baby. And they bring you cake and ice cream. And then you say, can you bring me my phone and my little electronic device so I can watch YouTube all day long and play video games till my eyeballs fall out? Yes, okay. What do you want for dinner? Spaghetti covered with chocolate sauce. Okay, I'll bring it to you. That'll be great, right? Because that's what kids want from kids. This is what it is. That's what kids want from their. But parents, unless you're a terrible parent, and none of y'all are, but unless you're a terrible parent, you know that if you give your kids what they want, you will destroy them. You'll destroy them. The same is true for you and me. So Jesus, John chapter 6, Jesus does this thing. He takes a little Lunchable. You know the Lunchables with the crackers and the meat? You know what I'm talking about? Not the pizza one. That's disgusting. But the other one with the crackers, they're all disgusting. It's just less disgusting, right? And he cracks it open, and he feeds 5,000 people, right, out of this little Lunchable. And people are like, ooh, that was a really good Lunchable, right? And then they're like, they get tired, and they're like, hey, we're going to go to the other side of the lake. So his disciples get in a boat, and start rowing to this side of the lake. And Jesus is like, I'll catch up. Why? Because he wants to show off. And he starts walking across the lake, right? And he gets to the other side of the lake, right? And then when he gets to the other side of the lake, you want to guess who shows up? The crowds. Everyone say the crowds. We got the crowds again. And the crowds found him again. Because they were here, and they got there, and they say, hey, Rabbi, when did you get here? And he's like, well, I took my feet. I walked across, and that's how I did, because that's what I do. But Jesus, no, that's what he said. He said, very truly, I tell you, you're looking for me, not because of me, not because you're trying to find me, not because of the signs, but because you what? And what? Why did the crowds follow Jesus? Because they wanted lunch. Listen, stop for a second. Just get this. Listen, they are standing in front of the incarnate God. They are standing in front of the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, like the guy who spoke everything into existence. They're standing in front of him, and he's like, what do you want? And they said, well, my tum-tum is empty, and you gave me food earlier. Can you give me some more of that? Right? Because what we want from Jesus is often not what we need from Jesus. And we laugh at them, but here's the deal. We do that all the time. We want physical bread, and we completely ignore the bread of life. Right? We want riches, and Jesus says, what good is it if I make you rich and you lose your what? Right? We want power and reputation. And Jesus says, whoever wants to become the greatest among you must become your what? Right? We want to punish those who hurt us. And Jesus says, you need to forgive them 70 times what? Right? We want a stress-free life. Jesus, why haven't you given me a stress-free life? And Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the what? Kingdom of heaven. Etc., 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 etc. What we want from Jesus is not necessarily what we need from Jesus. What we need from Jesus comes in Matthew chapter 12. It says, when some of them, Pharisees and teachers of the law, I'm just going to put this into American vernacular, some of those religious people that showed up to church on Sunday on Easter, right? Not you, other people, right? But some of them other peoples, they came to Jesus and they said, Jesus, show us a sign. What they did is they say, Jesus, show us a magic trick. Convince me. I'm here. Convince me. When I say jump, Jesus, you say how high. And if you do exactly what I tell you to do, maybe I might believe in you. Maybe I might follow you. Maybe I might obey you. And he answered them. He said, in a wicked, adulterous generation, ask for a sign. But none will be given to you except for the sign of what? The prophet Jonah. For as long as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so who will be where? Jesus said this. You want to see a magic trick? You want to see a sign? You want to see a miracle? Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you in advance so you're not confused. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to die. How? You're going to kill me, right? The evil in your heart is going to come through your hands, and you are going to grab me in the middle of the night. You are going to put me through a sham trial. You are going to beat me till you can't even recognize I'm a human being. You're going to put a crown of thorns on my head. You are going to march me through the streets naked, and then you are going to, as I go up Golgotha, you were going to nail me to the cross, and as I breathe my last breath and say, it is finished, after that you'll stick a spear in my side, through my heart, so blood and water, just so you can make sure I'm super dead, right? And then you're going to stick me in the grave, and I'm going to be there for 3 days. For 3 days, it's going to seem like evil won. For 3 days, it's going to seem like Satan won. For 3 days, it's going to seem like your sin won. For 3 days, the voices of darkness are going to cheer and say, look at what we've done. He is in the heart of the earth. Oh, but on that third day, I'm going to conquer death and show you that I'm the Lord of life. On the third day, I'm going to fulfill all those Old Testament scriptures about me and show you that it's about me. On that third day, I'm going to bring about that new covenant that's not written on stone, but it's written on your heart. On that third day, I'm going to open the heavens to you. I'm going to insert the Holy Spirit into you so that you can follow me. On the third day, I'm going to offer you eternal life because I've defeated your sin, your enemy, and death itself. Listen, Jesus isn't interested in giving us what we want, but because of Jesus' resurrection, we have all that we need. Right? Because of Jesus' resurrection, we have a peace that passes all understanding. Because of Jesus' resurrection, we have a hope that gets us through tomorrow. Because of Jesus' resurrection, I have an identity. Not an identity I have to work for, not an identity I have to give myself, but one that's given to me by my Father and my King. Amen. Because of Jesus' resurrection, I have a purpose. I have a purpose in my life that He has given to me. He has given me gifts. He has given me a path to walk down. I have assurance of my salvation because of the resurrection. When we get Jesus, we get everything else. You guys know this. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33 says this, but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and what? All these things will be what? Given to you as well, right? Once you get Jesus, you get everything else. But if you're clamoring for the everything else and you miss Jesus, you get nothing. So, large crowd, as the worship team comes up, which are you? This morning, end of March 2024, Grace United. Are you looking for physical bread and you're missing the bread of life? Are you, and many of us do this, are you saying in your life, Jesus, if you do X and Y and Z, maybe I'll believe in you. Maybe I'll follow you. If when I say jump, if you say how high, I'll consider your claims. Have you looked upon Jesus but not really seen Him for who He is? Have you heard Jesus but not perceived or understood Him? Are you the path that it gets taken away? Are you the rocky soil? Are you the thorny soil? Are you the good soil that you can see God's word just pour out of your life, and Jesus is the middle of your life and your identity and your passion? Through Jesus' resurrection, listen, you are invited to Him today. Look, and there's different parts, different people in here. Some of you know you're not a follower. You know you're not. And Jesus died on the cross for you. some of you in here, you've known Jesus in the past, but you've walked away. You're like the prodigal son. Just remember the story of the prodigal son. When that prodigal came home, what was the father doing? Arms open wide, celebrates. Bring the fattened calf, bring the ring. The son and daughter that has gone away has come home again. 2 promises. If you follow Jesus, it'll cost you everything. But if you follow Jesus, you'll have everything. So let me say this, and then we'll invite you up. Moses says in Deuteronomy chapter 30, today I place before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children